Good day. Welcome to the Strong Ambition podcast. And today we're going to discover what can you know about your body fat percentage, your bone mineral density, your metabolic rate, and possibly your hormonal health to make you the best version of yourself. This is all going to be done with the two co-founders of Body Measure. So today we're going to have Melina Elliott and Erica Henderson on the show, and we're going to discuss how they started their business, what inspired them to do it, and what are the amazing things that this business can do. Body Measure is where I get my DEXA scans from. And if you're not really familiar, a DEXA scan is like a very low dose x-ray that will actually tell you so much information about your body composition. I've had several tests in the past, and it's told me a far more accurate measurement, as even on skin folds could be 3 to 4. Sometimes I've even seen up to 10% off with some of the clients that I have. Plus, you can find out about your bone mineral density, which is super important for women as they age. We even talk about their metabolic cart tests, which you can find out how many calories you burn at rest. And what's even more exciting is they're starting up a new business called the Menopause. In this business, they go into a ton of detail, even looking into hormonal therapy to help women optimize their health so they don't have to struggle into their later years. This is a really cool discussion because Body Measure was a unique business on its own, and now the Menopause Practice is also a very unique business on its own. And it's really cool to hear about all the different things that you can actually expect to get from Body Measure, some of the great results they've seen, and even starting into this brand new business of the Menopause Practice. And just so you know, we actually start off the conversation with just me and Melina, and Erica joins us about a third of the way into it, and we get a great discussion all the way. So without further ado, here is Melina Elliott. Good day, Melina. How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm swell. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking your time. I'm super excited because I've been working with you guys now for a few years, and I think DEXA scans are great. I think what your organization is doing is awesome. But why don't you tell the listeners more about who you are, kind of what how you got into what you're doing now, and a little bit about the business.
Yeah, so my name is Melina Elliott. I am one of the co-founders of Body Measure, along with my amazing business partner, Erica Henderson. My background is I have a master's in science from the Faculty of Medicine, focusing on community health. And before Erica and I opened Body Measure, I was coordinating a national study on aging called the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, where we collected health data from 50,000 Canadians, and we follow them for 20 years of their life. And Erica was the X-ray technologist on the study. So that's kind of how we met, and we would do DEXA scans as part of the study. So looking at bone density as well as body composition data. We use that every day. And on a regular basis, we would have people come in who were participants in the study say, are you taking any more study participants? Because this information is so valuable to me. And of course, that's not the way research works. And then we would be able to tell people that they had certain conditions that they didn't know they had that we were able to find through the DEXA. So that was kind of really interesting. And that was always in the back of our minds. And then at the same time as all of that, I personally have struggled with my own body composition through my entire life. From the age of 5, you can see that I'm starting to get kind of chubby, and it just kind of continues on. In my entire life, I've struggled with that. Up and down and up and down, and never really able to find the right way to eat for my body, and having no real understanding about how I should be feeding my body. So I'm kind of like, I'm at the pinnacle of my career working at the university, running this amazing study, and then, but still so struggling so much with my own body composition. And we're using DEXA, which is body composition data. So I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And then one day, Erica says to me, why don't I do your DEXA scan? And I was like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, come on, let's just do it. And I was like, well, okay, so she does my DEXA, and all of a sudden I'm looking at my body. I'm looking at this printout, right? You've seen what it looks like. I was seeing 3 images of myself, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden I sort of started to look at my body in a different way and looked at all the numbers and was like, oh my gosh, I am eating totally wrong for my body. I'm eating completely wrong. And and so I thought, okay, I can work with this. And being from a research background, I'm like, the numbers, the data, I can work with this. So I completely revamped my nutrition, totally changed the way I ate, and I lost 100 pounds.
Wow.
I've kept it off for 7 years now. And so I'm losing all this weight. We're seeing all these study participants that are getting all this amazing information about their body. We're getting feedback from study participants that are saying, are you taking more people? And then I need to do a mass calibration of our DEXA machine where I need to compare it to every other data collection site in the country. So I've got to do 100 scans in a 2-week period. I send an email out to all my colleagues in the Faculty of Med, say, hey, I'm offering free DEXAs. Anybody want? Within 5 minutes, I had the 100 scans booked.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, and then Erica, we're sitting at lunch and she's like, we need to start a business. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, look at what you've done. Look at what you've done. Look at all the response. Look at how many people want this information. We need to start a business. And we had that conversation in February of 2018. And we opened our doors July 18th, 2018. So that was that's kind of that's the story of how it started. So my own personal journey and then getting that feedback from the study participants.
Well, that's so incredible. I love that that came so much from your own information and your own insight. And it's just like, it's an inspiring story too. 100 pounds. That's incredible. That's so much weight to lose and to sustain the weight loss, which is always the hardest part because 95% of people will gain that back. I'm super curious. What was it about the DEXA scan that made you change your food, and how did you use that information to make that decision?
Yeah. So I had been eating a very low calorie, low fat diet, right? Fat is evil and we need to eat very little. So I was in this constant state of hunger, which, you're like the willpower, you're muscling through, you're like, I'm going to do this. And you go a week, maybe you go 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm starving. I am so hungry. And you're like irritable and you don't have a ton of energy. And I was not eating enough protein because I'm eating all of these like 100-calorie snacks, and I thought, okay, so that clearly wasn't working. And then when I looked at my DEXA and I saw how I carry my body fat. So my genetic predisposition is to hold fat viscerally, so behind my abdominal wall and in and around my internal organs. That is my genetic predisposition. Everyone's is a little different, and my body wants to store fat there. So I am a superb store of fat, like really, like gold star, 5-star, 100%. And my body just wants to hold it all the time. So I thought, okay, that's not great. We need to address that because high visceral fat equals very high risk for type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, dementia, and Alzheimer's later on in life, metabolic syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome, like all that stuff you don't want. And then I looked at my total lean mass and it was really high because I was a very heavy person. And so to be able to move my body around, I had to have a lot of muscle. So I have great bone density because I've been heavy my entire life. So my bones have been pounded day in and day out from the age of 5 onward. And I also have a lot of muscle because I needed muscle to move my body around. So I was grossly under eating my protein, and I was not eating enough healthy fat, and I was eating way too many carbs for my body. So I was eating what's called like clean eating at the time, very, very low fat, high in grains, like brown rice, brown whole wheat pasta, lots of grains, but not the right way for me. So I had like heartburn all the time, indigestion, just kind of like just generally not feeling great, and like a real bloated feeling. And that was obviously from the high amount of visceral fat. So for me, I lowered my carbs way down. I went all the way down to, I was eating a ketogenic diet at that point. So 5% of my daily calories were coming from carbs, and higher protein, and then also high fat. So I did that. And then now I've transitioned to a low carb diet. And I rotate between like very low carb to low carb. I kind of go up and down depending on, what's going on in my week and that kind of thing. But that's where I feel the best. That has helped me to keep my visceral fat under a pound, which is ideally where we want to be, and to maintain my muscle, which is really key for longevity, and then also supports my bone health.
I love that insight. I love that you're able to take those numbers and know what makes it unique to yourself. I think that's really tangible stuff there. And obviously, this is the kind of stuff that you would provide your clients. The one thing I want to highlight there gets really overlooked for people who are trying to lose weight, who have a lot of weight to lose, is you don't realize that moving yourself around requires a lot of muscle to do it. And so not all the time, but quite often when you see, larger people, and if they do the fat loss and they don't do strength training, they don't eat enough protein, they lose a ton of lean mass in the process. They'll lose a body fat, but that's, then you'll have like the loose skin and all that stuff. But that's like you mentioned, it's like, hey, now I know my lean mass number. If I at least eat that much protein, I can maintain that, because I always say that's tissue you have a right to. That's your metabolic engine. Like, why would you want to lose that in the process of your weight loss? And so I love that you're using that kind of insight. And the visceral fat thing is everything I've learned from you guys. I didn't appreciate that visceral fat was such an issue till I went to go get my own DEXA scan, and, pointed out a couple of times, like, this is, and it was Erica who pointed out, it's like, this comes from being more insulin resistant. This comes from having a more high carb diet. But I also didn't appreciate, until you just mentioned it, this is somewhat of a genetic disposition for some people. So, because I was even surprised in my last scan recently. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the holidays. Like, I ate a lot on the holidays. But I was surprised how high it was, given I wasn't that bad leading into the holidays. So I was surprised to see that I had that high of a number when it was only maybe a couple of weeks. It was like 6 months of a muscle building phase. But would you say that you do see that kind of distinct difference in people, that some people will just put way more visceral fat on quite easy?
Yes. Oh yeah. We see that every day. Like, I could give you so many examples, but I'll talk about myself just because I can consent to being talked about.
Yeah, fair.
So like, literally, like, I always make a joke, like, I'm downwind from a carrot and I will put on weight. Like, that is how sensitive I am to carbohydrates, and everyone is a little bit different. So, and for me, instantly it will go to visceral fat. I can't drink a lot of alcohol, not that you should be ordinarily, but my body does not process that well. It stays in my system for a long time. That also leads to high visceral fat for me. So I really have to be very, very careful. There's an interesting story that I tell people sometimes, because a lot of the time, Erica and I look very different, right? We have very different bodies. And sometimes I'll get the feedback of like, well, should you really be talking about health? I don't know. Like, I get that semi-regularly. And I always say that everyone's body is different. And if you know someone that can eat anything and they don't gain a pound, why is it so difficult for you to believe that someone can stick to a really healthy eating plan and regularly moving their body and they still struggle to maintain their weight? Like, those two things exist.
Yeah.
Erica and I did a little mini test. We were in Las Vegas for a work conference, and we were there for 4 days, and we stayed in the same hotel room, and we ate all of our meals together, and we ate the exact same thing at every meal, because we kind of eat the same way. I eat low carb and Erica eats low carb. And so every day for 4 days, we ate and drank the exact same thing. But every morning I would get up and I would go for my big daily walk every morning because I'm an early riser. And so I would get up, I'd put my runners on, and I would go and do like laps around the hotel complex. And then I'd come back and we'd get on with our day. So every day I had more exercise than she did, but we ate the exact same thing. And I weigh more than her.
Right.
We get back, my weight stayed exactly the same, and she lost 3 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's different.
Oh, genetics, it's so real. The thing, like you mentioned, when people try to make that presumption about someone's fitness, it's like, well, they didn't know that you lost 100 pounds, right? And the perception of what we think fit is completely skewed. It's, from the fitness world. And like what healthy can be is now on a spectrum. It's far deeper than people realize. I had thought about this for years that, you can be morbidly obese, but you can be morbidly fit or morbidly lean, right? And it's almost like if you imagine on like a chart that has like quadrants, and there's like, you got really, really morbidly obese and overweight people. They actually have a lot of lean muscle tissue, right? And on that same side, I would say on the lower end, as you lower the body fat, they stay really lean. They're still like a really big bodybuilder that has low body fat percentage is still really unhealthy, kind of on that spectrum technically, right? They might have a lot of physical like body that they can use, but they still are, it's not a healthy amount of muscle mass. Like it's actually not good for them. Mm-hmm. On the other side of the spectrum, you have, morbidly like skinny, which would be anorexic. Mm-hmm. And then I would say you almost like if you bring it down on the chart, you kind of go into like physical capacity, and well, some marathon runners look like anorexic. So then where is health? Because we look at the one end of the spectrum, the bodybuilders on that as being healthy. Really in the middle, it's all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is actually, I think if you're exercising and trying to eat the right amount of food, even looking at some of the research that's come out now on longevity, it's like pretty amazing to see that healthy body compositions for females can be up to 35% body fat. And for males, it can be up to 22% body fat, which is not at all what you would assume, right? Yeah. And I think there's, I've said this a few times now, I think that says something about your lifestyle, right? Like when someone isn't trying to be, an aggressively lean body fat percentage when they don't have the genetics for it. Like that's a real thing. I have a colleague of mine, Mitch Calvert. He's does the online in Winnipeg, and he's like 22% body fat. His heart rate's 40 beats per minute. And he said when he tried to get down to my body fat percentage, it was unsustainable. And at my body fat percentage, he has almost half my heart rate. So it's like, he's fine. Like, I mean, we don't have to look at fitness in these silos, but I really like that you kind of found something really unique about yourself in terms of the way to eat using that information. What are some other really interesting insights that you get from a DEXA scan that can help people with understanding what sort of health interventions they need to take?
Yeah. We call it was actually Erica that coined the term, the blueprint for your body is what we like to call the DEXA, because it's so quick. You lay down on the bed, the arm just passes very slowly over your body, depending on how tall you are, 6.5 to 11 minutes, depending on, again, how tall you are. And then from that, we can pull out all the data to figure out what percentage of protein, carbohydrates, and fat you should be eating, how you carry your fat. So again, there's the dangerous fat, the visceral fat versus the subcutaneous fat, which, we may not like very much, but it's not going to kill us, right? And it's not going to shorten our lifespan. And then we're going to look at your risk for osteoporosis or low bone density. We're also going to be able to tell you what your risk for sarcopenia is, which is an age-related condition, which is the wasting of the muscles in the arms and legs, which really limits your mobility and your independence as you get older. So all of that we get from the DEXA. So you can really, you're customizing your nutrition, but you can also customize your exercise plan, right? So for me, when I looked at mine, I was like, okay, like I have a ton of muscle. My goal here is to maintain as much of this as possible. So cardio and some strength training is going to be best, but I don't need to like go absolutely insane on the treadmill for like 3 hours a day, right? I need to move in a way that I find enjoyable and sustainable, and then focusing on maintaining as much muscle as I can. But I had tons, so I did expect to lose some as I went along, but we really want to make sure that we minimize that loss.
Absolutely. I think that,
Did I just
okay.
Yeah, slide on in, baby.
Hi.
Here we go. All right. Erica, welcome to the show. Why don't you, we've got to hear your part of the story here, and then we're going to pick up from where we were just chatting there. So welcome to the show. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how your side of how you thought of starting the business. You told us kind of how it came up, but I'd be curious of your insight on that.
Okay. So I was working at the study, longitudinal study on aging, and Melina was running the study, and I was doing the DEXA scans, and I just thought this would be such a great idea to let people actually see their body composition and make fitness goals and fitness plans with all that amazing information. And I just walked into Melina's office one day and I said, "Hey, I think we should start a business." And we kind of just asked for forgiveness and not permission in a way, and we jumped over a lot of roadblocks and through a lot of red tape because we were the first to bring that to the public outside of the hospital. And the hospital only uses it for bone density. They don't do body composition. So we're the first to bring that to Manitoba, and it's worked out really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was your background prior as you were working on some research?
Yes, so I'm an X-ray technologist. I worked at Health Science Center for 27 years. After that, I went to the university to work on the study with Melina, doing DEXA scans primarily, so looking at bone density and body composition. And I've also been a fitness trainer my whole life and done that in the evenings and weekends and stuff. So technology about health and then just fitness and activity, all of that, both of those things were my passions. So this really worked out well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome. And what you had mentioned about jumping through red tape, I'm really curious. So is there a reason why they didn't want to offer it to the public?
Well, because it's a machine that uses radiation, even though it's very low dose radiation, so we don't have to have lead walls or lead floor or anything like that, not like a regular X-ray machine. To put it in perspective, you'd need to have 50 DEXA scans to equal the radiation of one chest X-ray. So extremely low. In fact, that's why it's safe for us to sit in the room while people are having DEXA scans done. Where a regular X-ray, you need to leave the room or wear a lead apron. But just because of that, it has to be under the guidelines of Cancer Care Manitoba. So we had to have them come out and test it, do all the radiation tests around the machine. We had to get their permission to actually buy the machine privately.
I think we bought it first.
Yeah,
we bought it, and then we're going to
ask for forgiveness. But yeah, so just a lot of things kind of fell into place. I had some connections in that whole world, and yeah, it just worked out well. So
I think in general, anytime someone is going to privately offer health-related technology or services, there's that concern around, private healthcare.
Yeah.
So that's really the big thing.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So we'll come back to what we were just talking about. We were talking about essentially the information that an individual can use once they've had a DEXA scan. As we mentioned now, like the visceral fat is a really big thing. And what I found was interesting, just come back to that a bit. I know someone who actually does similar stuff. They're doing research. They have a DEXA scan. They show me one of the scans because one of my clients could get it done there, but they didn't actually have the visceral fat. Is that unique to your machine?
It's a specialized software that we actually paid for to have that put into our machine. So not all DEXA scans have that. Yeah, so it's an expensive software, so most people just get it without.
Basic.
Which is, it's fascinating because I think by far it's the most impactful thing from my perspective as a trainer. If I get a client that gets it, like I can do rough skin folds on people, but I've had several clients now where my skin folds are way lower than their DEXA scan.
Yeah.
And now it's like, if I can't pick it up on subcutaneous fat, then you got a lot of visceral fat. And the one client, it doesn't even say the visceral fat on their number. And I'd be curious about what it is because their body fat's so much higher. And we were just talking about the genetics that play such a major role in those kind of people, right? That they just really have to be careful of the different types of foods that they're having. So we had mentioned that the visceral fat's a major thing that you look at, because then people would have to pay attention to, maybe they got to control the type of carbs they're having. They're going to be carb sensitive, most likely. And then lean mass. Obviously, every person should just be responsible for their lean mass. Maybe bringing it up or maintaining it in the course of fat loss. I'm assuming also, if you see some people with bone mineral density, what kind of advice would you give them on that occasion?
So that's a huge one. So when we do the whole body, we're getting an average of all of your bones. And that gives us a number, of T-score, which is how we measure bone density, but it always sits higher than the hip and spine. And if we're going to diagnose osteopenia, which is weakening of the bone, or osteoporosis, which is brittle bone, then we need to do a hip and spine, because that's different bone types. And we also those are the two most common areas for fracture when you have osteoporosis. So we also do hip and spine here. And so if I see somebody with a low bone density, or even just below normal, and especially if they're female, and especially if they're premenopausal or menopausal, I always suggest to do a hip and spine. And I can't even say how many women we have found osteoporosis or severe osteopenia in their late 40s and in their 50s. And really, we're huge advocates for women, especially because 1 in 3 women will have osteoporosis after the age of 50, of getting a hip and spine DEXA scan pre-menopause. So just see where you're at. Because if we've discovered that you have osteopenia, there are things that we can do. So number 1 is adding weight to your body. So getting a weighted vest, doing jumps with the weighted vest, walking with the weighted vest, because we want to impact that ground to stimulate the bone building osteoblast cells. And number 2, if you are just going into menopause, we can even look at hormone replacement therapy with our other business, Menopause Practice, because that can really help. If you go on hormone replacement therapy and you're a viable candidate for that, it can really help improve your bone density and protect your bones. So I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into that. I'm super excited to talk about the HRT. But that's some really great tips there. I mean, I would have said weight training, but I have heard that the weight training vest, I think, is brilliant, because that constant weight, if someone's in this kind of desperate state of, I really got to improve, it's actually a pretty simple thing. Just put on a weighted vest, try to wear it more routinely. And you mentioned jumps, and something I did actually hear makes such an impact for bone mineral density. Have you seen some of these interventions really work well for people before and after?
Yes, absolutely. And I've actually used myself as an example, because I went into menopause at age 51, and I'm 56 now. And at age 51, I had one of our technologists do a hip and spine on me here. And I was way above normal in bone density in my hip and spine. My whole body's in the 99th percentile. And then just recently, because at 51, I had just gone into menopause, I'm 56 now. So this past June, I did all my blood work with our nurse practitioner, and she's like, yeah, you have no hormones whatsoever. But I didn't really have what I thought were any symptoms, but I thought, I'll just do a hip and spine. I know I have great bone density, but let's just see if it's moved. And I lost almost 11% of my bone in 5 years. I was in osteopenia.
Wow.
Shocking to me. Because I eat really well, I exercise, I do all the things, and I had amazing bone density. So in June, I went on hormone replacement therapy, and I got a weighted vest, and I've been, supplements and just looking after my bone health. In 6 months, I've gained almost 4% bone back. I'm not in osteopenia anymore, and I'm just going up, and that's 6 months, right? So it's pretty cool to see. And if I hadn't done those interventions, I would be continuing to go down. So I could have easily hit osteoporosis in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I think Erica is such a great example because she's someone that has been physically active her entire life, right? And been doing a very high level of fitness her whole life. So lots of jumping, lots of sport. And we always say, oh, what are your risk factors for low bone density? Well, you lay down the majority of your bone in your late teens, early 20s. So if you're very active in that time and you maintain that activity throughout your lifetime, you should be good, right? So from that perspective, she should have been fine. But she's a perfect example to show the importance of getting that data early, right? So she knew at 51, okay, yeah, I'm fine. And then at 56 to test it again to see if there'd been any change. So it's a perfect example of the power of information being proactive, right? Where if she had waited for the healthcare system to give her a scan at 65, she would have had full-blown osteoporosis.
It's so unfortunate because that's, like you mentioned, you didn't feel symptoms. And, we were talking about it when we were in person there, like, osteoporosis, losing your bone mineral. And then I remember the rough stats, you probably know it better than I do, where it's like, if you break your hip above the age of like 60 or 65, your mortality rate is to die within the next 5 years. And it's a life sentence to break your hip.
It is. It's actually 33% of women who break a hip after the age of 65 will be dead in a year.
That's incredible. And it's literally just falling, right? Like, and, and again, prime example of yourself where you wouldn't expect it to happen, but it's there. And that's where this data can really make an impact. I think that's incredible. I was just curious, because you've seen so many clients now in the last so many years, from the DEXA, like from the body measure side of things, what are some really cool stories that you've seen this data make some great impacts over the last few years? What are some stories that pop up in your head that you're like, yeah, this really made an impact? I mean, obviously your story was tremendous, and I was just curious if anything else had come up.
So a story that kind of replays over and over again is when we see particularly men come in who are, they're not necessarily thinking they're not healthy or unfit, and we do their DEXA scan, and they've got 5 or 6 pounds of visceral fat, and they've been to their doctor. Their doctor is like, well, you're fine, but your blood pressure is just creeping up a little bit. We're going to watch your cholesterol. Your A1C is maybe borderline, but they've got 5 pounds of visceral fat, or they're pre-diabetic already, or their doctors told them they have a fatty liver, whatever the case may be. And then we show them their scan. And when you have 5 pounds or more visceral fat, it's a big ball of yellow in the middle of your scan. And we can show people that it actually pushes out the abdominal wall. So you get a rounding effect where your wall of your abdomen is rounded out. It pushes down on your pelvic floor and then up under your diaphragm. So it actually shortens your lung capacity, and you can show somebody how their diaphragm is actually up higher than it should be because of that visceral fat. So then they're obviously, taken back. We can get them on a program with our dietitian, eating a specific way for their body. And then when they come back for follow-ups, and we can show them how they're decreasing their visceral fat. And so often they're like, I can't believe this is happening. I wasn't even hungry. I didn't know it'd be this easy, because we get them eating in a way that their sugar cravings and their cravings go down. Their energy stays steady. They feel generally better. And it's really, that is one of my passions and Melina's passion. It's so fulfilling to see someone change their health so drastically.
I think that's incredible. And again, I think that visceral fat is just this sneaky thing that, again, I didn't even know about. You wouldn't know about unless this information was available. And how I think this is what I've even learned so much from you guys is that you can make these modifications. It's not just what your body fat percentage is, but what type of body fat and how that can actually, be changed in your behaviors. Is there any other kind of markers that you look at because I know you also do other testing in there of all the different, you can go over all the different testing that you guys do so people know about it, and what other kind of red flags you guys look for?
I think one of the ones that I've found really helpful for me and for a lot of people is our resting metabolic rate test. So oftentimes people will say, "Oh, well, I can't lose any weight because my metabolism is just in the toilet," right? And you're like, "Well, is it really? Like, we got to know, one way or the other." Or someone is like, "Google says I should be eating 2,000 calories a day, and that's what I'm doing, but I'm not losing any weight." So again, to know how your metabolism is running, that one is it's easy. It's got a 3% error rate, and it can answer so many questions. So if it's running really, really slow, but you have a ton of muscle, that doesn't really jive. So then that can be an indicator that maybe there's an issue with an underlying issue with thyroid or, something else. So, mine actually runs 30%. Am I 30% slow? No,
I think
15.
yeah.
15% slow. I'm 15%. She's 15% fast.
Fast, yeah.
15% slow. That's where I got the 30.
Yeah.
But yeah,
30% difference.
you think like, how much can I really eat? Not a lot. Like my body does not burn well. It just holds it, right? Where Erica can eat more because her body will actually speed up and will burn all of those calories.
Yeah, we've actually kind of done.
I told him the thing about Vegas.
Oh yeah, it's so funny. Every time we've traveled, I'll come home just a little leaner, and she'll yeah.
I just stay the
And
same.
we eat exactly the same. We order the same meals, so we both eat low carb, and we both kind of it's kind of funny.
So the RMR is such a powerful tool in that way to really answer those questions. To sort of DEXA will tell you how you should be eating, and then the RMR shows you how much you should be eating.
And it's good for red flags if there's something underlying that's going on because your metabolism should be much faster, but it's running slower. So thyroid is a big one, especially for women. We see a lot of women with thyroid issues.
That's great to hear, because that is the major one that I would wonder is like how to know if someone has the metabolic. And I was going to ask you if you noticed it, because like certainly Google is not going to be a great search unless you know the right kind of equation to look at. And I'm, even as a trainer, when I recommend calories and stuff like that, I'm still guessing. And I always say, you got to guess and check. So I use the Harris-Benedict equation for most clients. And then we try to titrate our calories as close to that as we can. And then we see if they burn the calories or don't. And I was curious if you ever did compare some of these equations to the direct metabolic test. And if you saw any equations that were slightly closer, or did it just vary that much depending on the individual?
I haven't done a direct comparison, but it really does vary. It's surprising sometimes. And also people that have been starving themselves on and off for years can affect their metabolism negatively. So that tends to slow their metabolism down. Yeah, and then just also genetics. There are just those people that just are calorie burning machines, and other people that are not.
Yes. Yeah.
We've had so many clients over the years that have, tried different things to sort of estimate how many calories they should be eating. And we've never had anybody be kind of really spot on the same as the RMR. And, in having done this for 6 years, we have a variety. We have all, doing all the biohacking and all of the awesome stuff that's out there right now. So we've never had anybody where it was like exactly the same. So
yeah, it's always a little bit different.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So that's great. Sounds like you guys got a ton of tools there. You can figure out your metabolism. You can understand what the body composition is doing for lean mass, for the different types of fats you have. And, even like when it comes down to bone mineral density. Now you're onto this new venture. So let's get into this new exciting project. Tell us about this new project you're doing.
Okay, I'll take it away, Melina.
Okay. Well, sort of over the last 6 years of running Body Measure and having a lot of female clients and being women ourselves, we've really seen a very significant decline in the access to women's health services. It's just, they just cut and cut and cut. And then we consistently see women coming into our office that are struggling and some suffering, and there is nowhere to go for support. And really the three most underserved areas in women's health are perimenopause, menopause, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. And Erica and I, women's health has really become a big passion of ours throughout the process. I mean, I think we've both had our own things, you know, that Erica's talking about bone density and that kind of thing. And so we've both had our own things and not felt that support within the system. And then every day having women come into the office and again expressing that lack of support. And then we met nurse practitioner Annabelle Reimer, who is an absolute star. Yes. And she is Menopause Society certified, and she was in agreement, and we were talking and saying, like, why is there nothing? We have to do better by women. We need to do better by women. And that conversation then spurred another conversation to say, like, okay, like, we can do better by women. We can make this better. And that's what started the menopause practice.
Okay. Well, let's dive into, what does someone expect from the menopause practice?
Well, basically what we're going to do is we're going to, someone calls for a consultation. It's going to be an hour consultation with one of our nurse practitioners. We're going to send them a health questionnaire, first of all, and then after that, a requisition for blood. We do an extensive blood work. So we're going to look at every aspect of their health and then the hormone health, right? So then they'll sit down with one of our nurse practitioners. They will do a full physical, everything, really assess that woman's health. And then depending on their needs, prescribe, you know, it might be hormone replacement therapy for some, it might be supplements for others, it might be, you know, whatever it might be. And then we're going to follow them and follow their progress. And with that, you know, most often we're going to partner with our other company, and we're going to do a DEXA scan, especially for hip and spine, because we want to know how is your bone density going into menopause. And really, we're just going to help you live your most vibrant life, because the story that we've been told as women for so long is, well, you know what? Perimenopause, menopause is just part of being a woman. You're just going to have to get over it. You're going to have to just deal with it. You know, other women went through it. You can go through it. We're kind of been told we need to suffer, and it's just part of being female, the suffering. And we're really here to say we do not have to suffer. Women don't have to suffer. There's lots of things that we can do, and we need to change that narrative. You know, we want to live long, healthy, vital lives. Right now, women are outliving men, but the last 10 years of their lives are not as in good health as men. You know, we're breaking hips, we're breaking wrists. We're just not as healthy. So going on hormone replacement therapy is just one of our tools in the toolbox, but that can protect your brain, your heart, your bones. And I always look at it, too, as, you know, if men were just losing all their testosterone at 50, they'd be doing something about it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, that's actually what's happening more than ever. It's coming up a lot in the culture now, that it's finally not being frowned upon. Now, don't get me wrong, there's guys that are 30, they're like, I'm on HRT. It's like, come on, bud, you know, it's you can slap HRT on everything, but no, it's a real thing that we now understand, that we can help optimize ourselves to live better quality of life when we're older. And like you mentioned, like for women, they just had this expectation. They just got to deal with it. It's going to be shitty. And now it's like, well, what if it didn't have to be as bad? What if you can have a better quality of life? You mentioned about living longer. Everyone needs to consider living longer, not existing, like actually being able to thrive in your later years. And when you think about losing your bone mineral density, losing your muscle mass, like literally becoming more frail, it's like no one's trying to be there. And so now it'll be super cool to see our culture, you know, evolve with accepting HRT. You talked to me a little bit about this before, Erica. What are some of the misconceptions around HRT?
Well, unfortunately, in 2002, there was a huge study done, and it was really put out to the public as this scary thing that's going to cause breast cancer. And that study has been completely debunked. It was done on older women, not even in the right category, not with it was all over the map. And it's not true. In fact, you know, hormone replacement therapy, it has so many positive effects, just brain health, heart health, because, you know, women, we don't suffer heart attacks the same as men until we are in menopause. right? Because estrogen helps to keep our arteries and everything soft and working well. And we take the estrogen goes away, and all of a sudden our risk factors are meeting men's, right? So estrogen is very protective. It's an anti-inflammatory. So it also helps our bones. Our bones have two types of cells, right? It's got the osteoclasts that are always breaking down, osteoblasts are always building. And when estrogen leaves the house, the osteoclasts are no longer kept in check. And that's why we start to lose bone at such a fast rate as compared to men. Even with our muscle mass, we need our estrogen, our testosterone, and progesterone. But testosterone is important as well. That's something we haven't touched on yet. But that can also help with building muscle, building bone, brain clarity, brain fog, something we haven't talked about yet either, which happens with loss of estrogen. So there's just so many ways that women are affected, and it's not this deadly thing, this HRT. In fact, if you were to say that estrogen caused cancer, then when women are flooded with estrogen when they're pregnant, why are they not being flooded with cancer? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you're literally talking about optimizing someone's hormones that would then optimize their energy levels, their sleep, then you're going to have better time for exercise, all these things. And you're going to tell me that person has more of a chance of cancer in the long term? Like, I don't understand that. It's always this problem with studies is one study can scare people and it can be misinterpreted. It's a huge problem. You need many studies before you really pull any sort of solid point from it. But it's great to hear that you guys are offering this thing that they can make such an impact. So from your perspective, who do you think needs to really consider coming to work with you guys when it comes to whether it's using the HRT or this side of the business?
I think any woman that is, because perimenopause can start in your mid-30s. So from your mid-30s on, any woman that is not feeling herself, is just something is not right. I'm maybe not sleeping well, or I'm waking up with night sweats, or I'm forgetting everything, or I'm in a bad mood. Anything where you're not feeling like yourself anymore, that's an indication of, okay, I need to do a little check-in to see where things are at, because everyone is a little bit different, and so I'm perimenopausal, and I had Annabelle checked everything for me, and my progesterone was starting to go a little bit low. So she's like, "God, do you want to kind of just ride it out, or do you want to optimize?" Well, guess what? I want to optimize. so a little bit of progesterone goes a long way,
Yeah.
and a little bit of that, and I was like, okay, I feel like myself again, and so any woman that is really struggling and doesn't have the resources and the support and wants to feel like herself again, that's who we want to see.
Absolutely. And would you say so peri or post-menopausal women should all come to see you? So even if they're after menopause, they should still, especially when it comes to HRT, I think these are the women who really need to pay attention to it. If they haven't yet, it's most likely to be in the most need of it, right?
Absolutely. So if you're post-menopause, we want to know how is your bone density? How's your thyroid functioning? What are your B12 levels? What's the iron like? All of that stuff, right? And so then can make some really solid recommendations to get you feeling your best.
That's awesome. And I know, Erica, you had mentioned that, no, I don't want to draw all the attention to this, but you do possibly work with some men in terms of paying attention to the HRT and whether or not it could be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, often when men are carrying a lot of extra fat too, that can have an issue with their testosterone, right? Because now they're getting too much estrogen on board. And so there's lots of things that are along those lines as well. But really with men, with Body Measure, we are looking at body composition. We're trying to keep them healthy, protect them from metabolic syndrome, which is when you have 3 or more conditions all stemming from visceral fat, like fatty liver, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Sleep apnea is also kind of a warning that you might have high visceral fat, because that is definitely goes hand in hand, or gastric reflux. So there's a lot of things that people might be having, and they're not really realizing that is caused from visceral fat.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, just like the impact that's going to have on everything else. Like if you don't have a healthy body composition, and, you know, I've talked to another client before where he's like, yeah, I think I want to go on TRT. I'm like, you're not even exercising. Like, why are we having this conversation? And then the funniest part about it was that he's like, yeah, well, I'm going to go get my blood work done and talk to my doctor about it. And then doctor said, like, you have terrific testosterone. You're just lazy. Like, it's just, and so it's like, I think it was like, I think it was in like the 600s. And if correct, what are the ranges that men, let's say in the ages of 40, should be expecting their testosterone to be roughly?
So that's out of my wheelhouse.
It is, yeah.
Women, it's up to 225.
Okay.
But for men, it's a lot higher. If you're looking at, like, when you look at doses for testosterone, women are about 1/10 of what a man takes.
Right.
So I know for me, I had 0.2. I basically had 0 testosterone,
Wow.
and now I'm at 125 because I'm on a testosterone cream. But yeah, and by the way, it really helps with clarity and that kind of thing. You might not notice tonight because it's been a long day and it's in the evening, but it really does.
Well, you know, I mean, even just from being around some guys in the gym who have done testosterone, it's like testosterone's a hell of a drug. Like, there's a reason why your body needs it. And now keeping it healthy and safe, it's an amazing technology that we can live with. Like, the idea that we can live younger, older is something that we should do. But it's amazing that we have clinics like yourself that can now optimize this so that we're doing it in a healthy way. We're doing it for the sake of health, and you're doing it with the appropriate parameters because, you know, obviously that term HRT can be used way too loosely, right?
Yeah, we never want to be above normal ranges. We want to be in normal.
Yeah, top end of healthy normal. Something that's interesting about the testosterone with men is that your body, a man's body can have a lot of testosterone, but that your body's not accessing it properly, which then there's another mineral in, and I'm not even going to attempt to tell you what it is because that is definitely Annabelle's area of expertise. But we've had some clients where, because Annabelle will test testosterone for men, so she absolutely handles that. So we still offer that here, but to make sure that you can have a lot, but that your body is actually using it in the right way. So if you have it, but your body's not accessing it, then it's useless, right? So there's so many different things there at play. So when somebody's like, oh, I want more testosterone, well, maybe you have enough, but maybe what's missing is that one little component so that you can use it properly.
Absolutely. Like, when I had a client even approach me, but I'm like, well, let's optimize everything else first. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you making sure you're doing your training at the right interval? There's just fundamental minerals, usually zinc and magnesium are a couple of really essential ones. And then you could even just try some of the herbs that are coming out. Like Tanga Ali is one that a lot of people are using now that it has some sort of a very subtle effect, but over time has seen to have some effect. And it's like, if you really need to go down that rabbit hole, I totally understand. But it's like, that's where you're playing with a little bit of fire. So you want to do everything to manage it first. And the one individual, it was like, you know, how's your stress at night? Say, oh, it's pretty high. It's just like, okay, so how are you really sleeping if you're that stressed before you go to bed? And if your cortisol is always high, obviously you're going to have a bit of an influx. And I'm more than willing to bet that his testosterone, he actually had told me it was okay. It was in a lower end. But it's like, when you're trying to manage a business, and he was training, he was doing a lot of things. But when you have that extra stress component, then that's already like, even if you have more testosterone, you're still going to be stressed. So you're not hitting the first, you know, handful of bases to begin with. But I think this is really awesome to hear. I would love to know if you've seen any, like, I know it's early because how long ago did you open up on the Jan 8th? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So have you seen any really good results so far?
Oh, yeah.
Well, because Annabelle has been doing this with us for a year, but we just hadn't
formalized it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can't even tell you how many women have come through the door and been like desperate and just like feeling so hopeless, leave, feeling kind of lifted up. Like, I feel like I have a plan here. I feel like things are about to change, and then come back 3 months later and walk through the door and they are like full of vitality and they are so happy and they're like, this is amazing. Like, it's been phenomenal. Like, really, I think I can say personally that Body Measure and the Menopause Practice, they are my absolute passion, because every day we are helping people feel better and return to their most authentic, great feeling self, right? Like, this, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I second that.
Well, that's great. And that's really what you're hoping for. So it's so great to hear that it's already made such an impact. And I'm excited to see what's going to do, because it's like January 8th, you guys just opened up, and there's going to be a big impact because our city needs it. I don't think there's anywhere else that people can really go for this kind of stuff. So I'm super pumped for you guys. And I always like to finish off with a little bit of what your most recent ambition is. I'd like to know from both of you. And it could be a little bit of business, but also personal, anything that you got that you're really excited coming down the pipeline.
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, this for me is it's business. We've had a soft opening with the Menopause Practice, but our grand opening is going to be May 1st. So just kind of preparing and building for that. We're going to be in a couple of magazines, and we're gonna just make it huge when we open on May 1st. So we wanted to have a soft opening, get through all the sort of the bumps and figure it all out, be running really smooth, and then just go hard. So yeah, we're just full on in right now.
Yes. I think that it's been so exciting to open this second business. I think neither of us had any business experience. And when we kind of came up with the idea of Body Measure, there were so many naysayers. Like, everyone said, our friends, our family, the only people who thought it was a great idea were the two of us and our husbands. That's it. Like, everyone else literally told us, do not do this. Like, and we proved them all wrong. Like, we built this concept and this space that is inclusive and welcoming and judgment-free, and that at the same time is providing you with life-changing data, life-changing information, and a plan. So we've built that out, and it's been successful beyond our wildest dreams, and we've learned so much. We've had so many crazy, like, we could do a whole podcast on all of the crazy things that have happened. and then now to have this idea, to see all of these women that are struggling, and to say, like, hey, like, we can do this. We can make a difference here too. So let's go. And there's just, it's so amazing. It's just, I'm literally living the dream right now.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. I like, even from the very first part of your story where you guys managed to think of a business and you made one within a year. Like, a lot of people will just always have the backyard talks, like, yeah, we should start a business someday. Eh? Oh yeah, maybe we'll do that thing. And then you made it happen. Like, over the course of a few months. It's incredible. And now you're on to your second venture while running your own business. And I think it's going to make a huge impact. So why don't you let all the listeners know where they can find out more about the business?
So at Body Measure, you can check out our website, which is bodymeasure.ca, and the Menopause Practice is themenopausepractice.ca. So pretty easy.
There we go. Perfect. And then also find you on Instagram?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Instagram, Facebook, call the office.
Okay.
Email, all of it. Carrier pigeon, whatever.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I'll definitely leave that all in the show notes. And I really appreciate you ladies coming on here. This was a great time. And I'll be doing my follow-up here in a couple of months. So I'll see you in a couple of months in person.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Melina and Erica. I really enjoyed it because I am someone who really appreciates measuring progress and being able to do it very accurately, as I've been trying to do it in the past with some of my own skinful tests, but this is a far more accurate way. And I've been able to find out some great information and seeing great success that way. Sometimes people even ask me, like, is a DEXA scan worth it? And my answer is always, how much is the result worth it to you? So if you're someone who's really concerned about their health, then it could be really worth it to you. And what I really recommend people do is that they consider a time block that they really want to commit to health change. And it should be very motivating to do so. Remember too, at Body Measure, you can have a dietitian actually give you recommendations based on the information as well. But sometimes progression can be really hard to measure, especially when it comes to body composition. Now, at the end of the day, if someone, say, is going into a fat loss phase and they say, I'm going to take it really serious for the next, 3 to 6 months, and I know I want to see progression. You hire a coach, a trainer, maybe you do it yourself, but you take some baseline measurements like a waist measurement. And let's say you take your weight, and you could honestly just do that. You could measure your waist and your weight and see if your clothes get fit better. It's going to work. But there's also some more value in, hey, was I able to retain the lean mass that I want to? Was I able to even grow some muscle mass? Because actually being able to measure muscle mass growth is really difficult without any DEXA scan or anything like that. It's really just predictive and correlative. And when you're trying to know how successful you are, like for myself, it's a part of my business. It's a part of my identity, and I'm able to actually really learn from this to help my clients. So it's easy for me to justify the expense, not just because it's a business expense, but because it does help me understand what I'm doing better. As you'd seen in some of my previous podcasts, I wanted to see how much I grow, and I could see conclusively that I grew my arms, I grew muscle. I like to see how lean I really was when I was doing the bodybuilding show. I could see conclusively how much fat loss I had. And I also want to be really cautious on how much lean muscle I lose in a fat loss phase. As I saw last year, I lost way too much because I didn't do enough volume. So these things have been all really helpful for me, and especially the visceral fat. The visceral fat has just been this massive education for me that I didn't pay attention to. Would I not have done the DEXA scan, I might not even know about it nearly as much. And it made me really start to pay attention to how my dietary habits have changed overall. And they have positively changed in terms of not binging as much. But when I am gaining a bit more weight during the muscle building phase, I'm also snacking more. So I might not be having as big of massive servings, big binges, but more snacking spread out over time can still add up a lot of calories and be really unhealthy. As Melina actually pointed out, and Erica pointed out, that certain people have body types that if you end up being a snacker and you're having a lot of carbs and your metabolism is something that just wants to gain weight, you could actually be very insulin resistance very quickly. And I think that is likely what I have with my body type. I retain fat very quickly. I can also build muscle quickly. Don't get me wrong. Very similar to Melina is I know that you got to own the muscle you have. You got to be very proud of that, making sure that you're training that, because that tends to be the asset for people who actually can put on weight easy. They can maintain or improve muscle mass a lot easier as well. But the information I was able to achieve from the DEXA scan made it worth for me, and also made me be able to actually adjust my own dietary habits. And I plan on keeping my dietary habits better in my next muscle building phase so that I don't, risk that insulin resistance and put on the visceral fat again. That'll be probably my main goal going into this next build phase. And I just loved hearing Melina's story about losing 100 pounds, keeping it off, and how the information she got actually changed everything. Realizing she was eating too little, not eating enough protein. Very common mistake for people. And the thing that got me really curious about is the metabolic test. I would be so curious to see before and afters of a build to a cut phase to a build phase of what that does to the metabolism with a more accurate measure. Now, I don't think it's going to be dramatic for me or life-changing for me, but it's information I can use that'll actually help me predict other things for other clients. So my plan is to possibly do a metabolic test at the end of this fat loss phase in about a couple of weeks here. We'll see when I actually line it up. And then do it again the next time I do a DEXA scan. So I see, once I rebuild more muscle tissue after the fat loss, is there any change in my metabolism over time? It could be 50 calories. It could be none. And it'll also probably depend on the duration of the calorie deficit. It'll depend on the duration of the build phase, but it is information that is valuable to me. Now, just to come back to, is a DEXA scan right for you? This is the way I would play it if you were going to, is don't just do it to do it. Do it because you're using it as a before and after measurement. One of the great things about Body Measure is they'll give you a 50% off if you do a follow-up scan within 6 months later. So you do your initial scan, whatever testing you want, and then from there, follow up 6 months later and make sure that you've made progression. Now, having that investment in the measurement and then using that information saying, I have this date that I want to be better for, is really motivating. It's similar to hiring a coach or a trainer. And then that way, you're using that information with great value. Now, you can lose weight without this information, but as we talked more about as women age, or probably even as men age, it becomes an increasing risk for osteoporosis. And so you might want to know your bone mineral density. You might want to get that optimized. And this is why places like this are great, because we are in the realm of optimizing health, not just being healthier, which I think a lot of people just need to be healthier. Some people want to live great. Similar to what Melina said, I want optimal. Like, who wouldn't as they age? Don't you want to be even better as you age, rather than feeling like, I'm getting older, I'm getting worse, when you can actually continue to feel better? And I think that this menopause practice is amazing. I think this is exactly what the world needs, for sure, in Winnipeg, because women, unfortunately, do just get the shit end of the stick on this. When I have some women ask me about nutrition specific for women in menopause, I don't really see much of a difference. You know, there is definitely, want to make sure they have magnesium. We want to make sure that they, have basically everything that anyone else would need, but it's harder. And this isn't just coming from me. I've talked to women going through menopause that are coaches, and they say the same thing. It's just that you have to consider the individual's experience before, during, and after menopause is going to be hard. And so it's already going to be hard. But maybe if you had good information, you could look at your hormonal health, which is a huge technology that can really help us age better than ever before. This could really actually tell you a different story about your later years in your life, and you don't have to feel so forgotten by society, so to speak. And I think it's incredible what these women have done. They started off with a business that they just had over a discussion. I said this on the show. It's like, some people just talk shit about having a business someday, and then some people make it happen. Some people actually try to go out and do it, and they did it within a year. And then they started up a new one while they're already running their other business. And I think it's incredible. I think it's so great to hear that they had to come through all these hurdles and all the doubt, but they were able to overcome and create these two tremendous businesses. So I can't recommend it enough. If you're serious about your fitness, you're serious about making change, I highly recommend you go reach out to them and you see what you can do with yourself in 6 months, and take it serious. Make sure you're following all the information and see how you can optimize your health to live a better life. And I just want to remind you, I'm going to be doing my follow-up DEXA scan here very soon in a few weeks. And that is for the Cookie Cutter Challenge, eating a cookie every day and losing weight. And we're going to see very conclusively on the DEXA scan, hey, did I bring down my visceral fat despite eating cookies and all the other stuff? I am still enjoying myself. I'm still going out. I had Valentine's Day recently. Still had outings at my niece's birthday party. I'm still having fun. And you'll be able to see conclusively at the end of the 60 days, hey, can you do this? And I'm already showing that you can, as I'm already down over 10 pounds. And so I'm really excited to see that. But remember, too, the really cool thing for you is at the end of the 60 days, I'm going to have a 30% off of my program for you to take advantage of, so I can show you exactly how you can lose all the weight that you want and keep eating cookies while you do it. So make sure to keep watching for that story and watch for the sale at the start of March. And I just got to say, as always, thank you so much for listening. I always appreciate you taking your time, learning some stuff about health and nutrition and fitness, and just, staying with the podcast. And I really, truly appreciate it. I mean, if you can, leave a review, or at very least, maybe refer this podcast to someone else that you think it might interest, especially around that hormonal optimization, health optimization. If you know someone like that, it will really help this podcast grow because referrals are by far the best. And so thank you again for listening. I truly appreciate it because I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you chase your own ambition, because life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.